I never thought I'd be the type of person to post about my engagement on social media before telling my parents. The ring was beautiful, a princess-cut diamond that caught the light perfectly as I held up my hand to take the photo. Mark had proposed just an hour ago, and I was still floating on cloud 9. "You're sure you don't want to call your mom first?" Mark asked, watching me adjust filters on my Instagram post. "Trust me, it won't make a difference," I said, hitting post with a slight smile. "Remember last Christmas when I told them I got that big promotion at work?" Mom just nodded and immediately started talking about how Jessica had just bought a new house with her successful lawyer husband. Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Maybe things will be different now. People change, Ruby." I wanted to believe him, but 27 years of being the family disappointment had taught me otherwise. The memories were endless: my 6th grade piano recital where my parents left halfway through my performance to attend Jessica's cheerleading competition, my high school graduation where they spent the entire ceremony talking about Jessica's college acceptance letters, even my college graduation, where they spent more time bragging about Jessica's engagement than acknowledging my magna cum laude honors. "Jessica this, Jessica that," I mumbled, leaning back into Mark's embrace. "You know, when I got into NYU for my master's degree, Mom's first response was, 'Oh, that's nice dear, but did you hear Jessica is expecting?'" The phone rang barely 2 hours after my post went live. I looked at the caller ID and showed it to Mark with a knowing smirk. "Here we go." Ruby Marie Thompson, my mother's voice was shrill through the speaker. "How dare you announce your engagement on social media before telling your own mother?" I had to find out from Aunt Carol, who saw it on Facebook. "What kind of daughter does that?" I bit back the response I'd been holding in for years, that maybe if they'd shown any interest in my life before, they'd be the first to know about important moments like this. Instead, I kept my voice neutral. "Hi Mom, I was going to call you tonight." "Never mind that now," she cut me off, her tone shifting from angry to excited so quickly it gave me whiplash. "We simply must have the engagement party at our house. We'll invite all the family, the Petersons, the Hendersons, oh, and the Clarks just got back from Europe." I caught Mark's eye and mouthed "help me" as my mother rattled off what sounded like half the state's population. "Actually, Mom, Mark and I were thinking of having a small celebration at—" "Nonsense," my father's voice suddenly boomed through the phone. Apparently, I was on speaker. "This is not up for discussion, Ruby. We're hosting the engagement party, and we'll cover all the costs. It's what proper parents do." I felt my eyebrows shoot up at that last part. Proper parents? Since when? But before I could voice any objection, my mother was already talking about caterers and flower arrangements, and somehow I found myself agreeing just to end the conversation. After I hung up, Mark pulled me close. "See? They want to be involved. That's good, right?" I nodded slowly, trying to ignore the knot of unease in my stomach. "Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they're finally seeing me as more than just Jessica's little sister." The few days after my parents' phone call were surprisingly peaceful. Mark kept saying "I told you so" with that adorable grin of his, and I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, things were changing. Then my phone started blowing up with Facebook notifications. "Ruby, you need to see this," my friend Katie texted, followed by several screenshots of my mother's latest Facebook post. I opened Facebook and there it was, complete with flower emojis and hearts. As a mother, nothing brings me more joy than announcing that I will be hosting my youngest daughter Ruby's engagement celebration at our family home. Planning this special day is not just my duty as a mother, but a labor of love. Every detail will be perfect, from the hand-picked flowers to the gourmet catering, because that's what a devoted mother does for her child. I nearly choked on my coffee. The comments were even worse. "Diana, you're such an amazing mother. Ruby is so lucky to have you. This is what true motherly love looks like. You've always been the most dedicated mother I know." And my mother was eating it up, responding to every comment with fake humility. "Oh, you're too kind, just doing what any good mother would do. Being a mother is my greatest blessing." Can you believe this? I showed my phone to Mark, who was making breakfast. Well, at least she's excited about it, he offered, sliding a plate of pancakes my way. Excited about the attention, you mean, I corrected him. This isn't about me or our engagement. It's about her showing off what a perfect mother she is. As if to prove my point, my mother's next comment popped up, and of course, my eldest daughter Jessica will be there. She's such a model of what a married woman should be, truly a beacon of virtue and family values. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Of course, I muttered. Heaven forbid she post anything about me without bringing up Saint Jessica. Mark read over my shoulder and squeezed my hand. Hey, look at the bright side. While she's busy playing Mother of the Year on Facebook, we can focus on planning our actual wedding. He was right. Our wedding was set for 8 months from now, and my mother would be occupied with the engagement party happening in 2 months. Maybe this wasn't such a bad arrangement after all. She could have her social media moment, and I could plan my wedding in peace. My phone rang at least 3 times a day, with updates from Mom about the engagement party preparations. As much as I hate to admit it, she was really good at this stuff. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the hand-calligraphed invitations to the custom cocktail menu. I actually found myself looking forward to seeing how it would all come together. Your mom called again, Mark said one evening as I got home from work. She wants to know if we prefer the string quartet to play classical or contemporary pieces. I flopped onto our couch, kicking off my heels. At this point, she can have them play the Pokemon theme song for all I care. At least I don't have to deal with any of it. Speaking of planning, Mark's sister Emma chimed in from where she was sprawled in our armchair with her laptop. I found 3 more bridal boutiques for us to check out this weekend. Emma had become my wedding planning savior. She had organized countless corporate events and charity galas. While Mom was consumed with the engagement party, Emma and I had been tackling wedding details together. She had better taste than I did and wasn't afraid to be honest when something looked terrible on me. The wedding plans were coming along nicely. Mark's parents, Tom and Linda, were incredibly helpful without being overbearing. They'd come over every Sunday to discuss venues and catering options, always bringing dinner so we could focus on planning. It was refreshing how normal and drama-free everything felt with Mark's family. Even more surprising was how things seemed to be improving with my own family. Every Saturday, I'd go to my parents' house for dinner, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mark, and for the first time in my life, they actually seemed interested in me. "How's that new project at work going?" Dad would ask, actually waiting for my answer instead of immediately turning the conversation to Jessica. "Tell us more about how you and Mark met," Mom would say, genuinely listening to the story. It was weird. Nice, but weird. Like entering a parallel universe where I wasn't just Jessica's little sister, but my own person worthy of attention. The days flew by, and suddenly we were just 2 weeks away from the engagement party. I was at my desk, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Ruby, you need to come to the house right now," she demanded, her voice tense. "It's urgent." I spent the rest of the workday distracted, wondering what could be so urgent about an engagement party that was already practically planned down to the last detail. As soon as 5 o'clock hit, I grabbed my things and headed to my parents' house. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew something was off. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the house, specifically, the sound of my nephew Tyler and niece Emma, ages 6 and 3. As I rounded the corner to the living room, I saw them running circles around the coffee table while their mother, my perfect sister Jessica, sat on the couch. Something felt off. Jessica lived 3 states away and rarely visited outside of major holidays. The last time she'd shown up unannounced was, well, never. As I moved closer to the group, I noticed Jessica's makeup was smeared, her eyes red and puffy. Mom and Dad sat on either side of her, looking like someone had died. The knot in my stomach tightened. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my purse down. "Jessica, is everything okay?" She let out a choked sob, and Mom wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Dad stared at the floor like it held the secrets of the universe. I left him, Jessica finally managed between sniffs, we're getting divorced. I nearly fell into the nearest chair. Jessica and Tom, getting divorced? The same Jessica who posted weekly blissfully married updates on Instagram? The same couple my mother had been shoving in my face as the epitome of marital perfection for the past 7 years? But, what happened? I asked carefully. I thought everything was great between you two. Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with anger. It's none of your business, Ruby. God, you always have to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. I raised my hands in surrender, but before I could apologize, Jessica deflated like a punctured balloon. He cheated on me, she whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a crumpled tissue, multiple times. I found messages on his phone, pictures. I couldn't take it anymore. So I packed up the kids and left. Mom made a sympathetic noise and stroked Jessica's hair, while Dad continued his intense study of the carpet. I sat there, processing. Just last month, Mom had been telling everyone at Cousin Sarah's baby shower how Jessica and Tom were relationship goals and how every young couple should look to them as an example. I'm so sorry, Jess, I said, and I meant it. Despite our issues, she was still my sister, and this obviously wasn't easy for her. I thought that was it, the big urgent news Mom had called me over for. I was already mentally composing a text to Mark about postponing our dinner plans when Mom cleared her throat. There's something else, Ruby, she said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like. Your father and I have been talking, and, well, given the circumstances, we think it's best if we cancel the engagement party. With everything Jessica's going through. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The room started spinning, but I forced myself to stay focused. Mom, you can't be serious. Everyone's already been invited. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike are flying in from California. The Hendersons are driving up from Florida. Grandma Helen already booked her hotel room. That's when Jessica exploded. She jumped up from the couch, mascara streaking down her face, pointing her finger at me like a weapon. God, you're so selfish, Ruby, she screamed, making her children stop their playing and stare. My whole life is falling apart. Do you have any idea what it's like to find out your husband's been sleeping with other women? To have to explain to your kids why Daddy isn't coming home? And all you can think about is your stupid party. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Jess, I'm truly sorry about what happened with Tom, really, I am. But my engagement has nothing to do with your divorce. These are completely separate events. Nothing to do with it, Jessica's voice went up another octave. I'm your sister. You're supposed to support me. You should have offered to cancel the engagement yourself the moment you heard about my situation. But no, you're too self-centered to even consider my feelings. I turned to my parents, hoping for some semblance of rationality. Mom, Dad, please, this is crazy. You can't just cancel everything because Jessica's upset. Mom straightened her spine, putting on what I called her principal face, the one that meant her decision was final. Actually, I can, I've already done it. I called the caterer this morning to cancel. The decorations order has been canceled too. And I've started calling the guests to let them know the engagement is canceled due to an important family matter. The room went silent except for the sound of Tyler and Emma whispering to each other in the corner. You did what? I could hear my voice rising, but couldn't control it anymore. It's my engagement. You had no right to do this. Don't you dare raise your voice at your mother. Dad finally found his full voice. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. You mean like how you've spent my entire life making me feel second best to Jessica? And now you're literally canceling my engagement party because she's having a hard time? How dare you, Jessica shrieked. I knew you were jealous of me, but this is a new low. You know what? I grabbed my purse, my whole body shaking with rage. You've set me up. This whole thing, the party planning, the sudden interest in my life, it was all just another way to prove that Jessica comes first. Well, congratulations. Message received, loud and clear. I stormed out of the house, ignoring their calls for me to come back. The drive home was a blur. When I finally made it back to my apartment, Mark was waiting with a concerned look on his face. "Ruby, what's wrong? You weren't answering your phone." I collapsed onto our couch and told him everything. Before we could even begin to process it all, my phone started blowing up with messages and calls from relatives. "Ruby, sweetie, are you okay? We heard about the breakup. We're so sorry. If you need someone to talk to." I sat there, staring at my phone in confusion, until Aunt Carol's message made everything click. "Your mother told us about the engagement being called off. I know it must be hard watching Jessica go through her divorce while planning your own wedding. Maybe it's for the best to take a break." That's when I understood. Mom hadn't just canceled my engagement party, she'd spun the story to make it look like I was the one having relationship problems. She'd protected herself and Jessica by making me the villain of the story. I was still staring at my phone in disbelief when Mark gently took it from my hands and set it on the coffee table. "Hey," he said, pulling me close, "remember what we originally wanted to do before your mom hijacked everything? A small, intimate celebration with the people who actually care about us." He grabbed his own phone and started scrolling through his contacts. "And I happen to have a sister who's basically a professional event planner." Mark was already dialing. We've got a situation. Look, can you help us put together a restaurant party for the original engagement date? 2 weeks from now?" I could hear Emma's enthusiastic voice through the phone. "Are you kidding? I've been wanting to rescue this party from Mother Dearest since day one. Give me an hour, I'll call in some favors." For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I felt myself smile. While Emma worked her magic, I opened my laptop and started drafting a social media post. "Dear friends and family, I want to clear up some confusion. Mark and I are still very much engaged and happy together. Our engagement celebration will still take place on the originally planned date, but we've decided to move it to a restaurant setting for a more intimate gathering. To those who've already made travel arrangements, we would still love to celebrate with you. Please let me know if you'll be able to attend the revised celebration. With love, Ruby." The responses started coming in immediately. Some said they would definitely come. But others have already canceled their tickets or planned something else. I grabbed a notepad and started counting confirmed guests. My side of the family had shrunk considerably. Apparently, Mom's phone calls had done their damage, but Mark's family was coming in full force. His parents, Emma, his aunts and uncles, cousins. 30 people. I called Emma back. "Hey, we need space for 30 people." "Already on it," she replied, and I could hear her typing. "I've got 3 restaurants on hold. How do you feel about that Italian place where Mark took you for your first date?" I felt tears welling up again, but this time they were happy tears. This was more like what I'd wanted all along, something meaningful and personal, not my mother's social spectacle. My phone rang the next morning while I was getting ready for work. I saw Tom's name flash across the screen, my sister's husband, or ex-husband now. We'd always gotten along well, often texting about the kids or family gatherings, though we hadn't spoken since Jessica dropped her divorce bombshell. "Ruby, it's Tom, I heard about your engagement party. I wanted to congratulate you and Mark. I know I won't be able to make it to the restaurant celebration, but I wanted to wish you guys all the best in advance." Before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. "How could you do it, Tom? How could you cheat on my sister?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Tom let out a strange sound, something between a laugh and a sob. "Is that what she told you?" His voice was quiet. "Ruby, I never cheated on your sister. Not once. Jessica was the one who had affairs, multiple affairs. I have proof, messages, hotel receipts, everything. Her latest boyfriend even sent me pictures of them together, thinking I already knew about their relationship. The room started spinning. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Tom, would you be willing to tell me everything? And, would it be okay if I recorded our conversation? Actually, I'd prefer that you did. I'm tired of being the bad guy in her story. I quickly set up the voice recorder on my phone. For the next hour, Tom laid out the whole ugly truth: Jessica's string of affairs, her gaslighting, her manipulation of everyone around her. He had dates, names, evidence, everything. The days flew by, and suddenly it was the evening of our engagement party. The restaurant looked beautiful. Emma had outdone herself with the decorations. 30 of our closest friends and family members filled the private dining room with warmth and laughter. For a while, everything felt perfect. Then my Aunt Carol pulled me aside during the appetizers. "Ruby, honey, I need to tell you something," she said, clutching her wine glass. "Your mother called me yesterday. She was saying awful things about you. Called you an egoist and a terrible daughter and sister for going ahead with this party." My stomach dropped, but before I could respond, other relatives started chiming in. "She called me too," Uncle Mike said, shaking his head. "Told me not to come because it would hurt Jessica's feelings." Cousin Rachel joined in. "She's been calling everyone, Ruby. Saying we shouldn't support your selfish behavior because Jessica is suffering from her divorce and her husband's infidelity. She said having this party is like twisting the knife in Jessica's back." Looking around at the confused and hurt faces of my relatives, I knew it was time. The lies had gone on long enough. "Everyone, could I have your attention for a moment?" I stood up, phone in hand. "There's something you all need to hear." The room fell silent as I pressed play on the recording. Tom's voice filled the private dining room, clear and steady, as he detailed Jessica's affairs, the evidence he had collected, and how she had turned everything around to make him look like the villain. He explained how she had manipulated everyone, including their children, to maintain her image as the wronged wife. For the next 15 minutes, you could have heard a pin drop. Aunt Carol's wine glass stayed frozen halfway to her mouth. Uncle Mike's fork clattered onto his plate. Cousin Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. "And my parents," I said after the recording ended. "They knew everything. They knew the truth about Jessica, but they were still willing to destroy my engagement party to protect her lies. They chose to hurt me, again, just to keep up appearances for their precious firstborn." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Aunt Carol stood up and wrapped me in a tight hug. Others followed, offering apologies and support. Even those who had initially sided with my mother were now shaking their heads in disbelief. "Let's focus on what really matters today," Mark announced, raising his glass. "We're here to celebrate our engagement and our future together." The party continued, warmer and more genuine than before. The truth had cleared the air, and for the first time I felt truly seen by my extended family. The next morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. My parents. "How dare you?" Mom's voice was shrill through the speaker. "How dare you humiliate your sister like that? Airing our family's dirty laundry in public." "I didn't air anything," I replied calmly, "I just revealed the truth you'd been trying to hide." What followed was a tirade from my mother that would have made any sailor or janitor blush. She finally hung up after calling me every horrible name she could think of. Minutes later, my phone started buzzing with messages from Jessica. Each text was worse than the last, calling me a traitor, a horrible sister, accusing me of being jealous of her my entire life. She even claimed I had orchestrated everything with Tom to ruin her life. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I blocked both my sister's and my parents' numbers. Mark found me later that morning, staring at our wedding planning notebook. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside me. "Actually, yes," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "I just made some changes to our guest list. It's smaller now, but better." Looking back now, I don't regret exposing the truth. I don't regret cutting ties with my parents and Jessica. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. But that's okay. Mark, Emma, and their parents have shown me what real family love looks like. In 6 months, I'll officially become part of their family, and I couldn't be happier about it.
I am living with my son out of consideration for my mother-in-law and her feelings. Please put Max first. What do you mean by that? From now on, the grandparents will be doing the kindergarten pickups and making the lunches. The grandchild is a treasure, right? The daughter-in-law said this with a smirk. So this is her true nature. I am so upset that it makes me sad. We were suggested by our son to live together and started living with his family 3 months ago. Living with our grandson was very joyful, but taking our silence for granted, the daughter-in-law started neglecting the household chores and care of her own children. When we finally addressed this, she responded with the words I mentioned earlier. Unable to say anything, my husband, who had overheard our conversation from the next room, came in. If that's what you say, we'll do exactly that. After all, you're living with us. My husband gave me a meaningful look. Yes, we will take care of Max ourselves. Pleased with our response, the daughter-in-law went back to her room with a satisfied expression. If Erica means that, then we have to respond appropriately. I nodded at my husband's words. My name is Kim Brown. Our only son, Steve, left home 6 years ago when he got married. Now, I live with my husband Howard. Howard is 55 years old. He was a middle school teacher but retired early 2 years ago due to the demanding nature of his job. The kid is already independent, and we have some savings. We'll manage with my part-time job for now, so don't worry. I convinced my husband, who had worked hard for our family, to take an early retirement. 6 months after he quit his job, his health remarkably improved. Maybe I should start tutoring. After more than 30 years as a teacher, he continued to engage with children by working part-time at a tutoring center without overdoing it. He is very lively now. This experience made us deeply realize how being healthy in both mind and body is truly blissful. Our current life is ordinary, but we are very satisfied with the peace of mind it brings. Max, you'll be a first grader next year. Have you already bought your school backpack? Our lives drastically changed the day after this conversation, triggered by a phone call from Steve. Steve lived about a 30-minute drive away with his wife Erica and their 5-year-old son, Max. Although we often reached out to see our grandson, it was rare for them to contact us. So, it was unusual when Steve called. It's rare to hear from you. Are you 3 all well? Have you bought Max's school backpack yet? I ended up bombarding him with questions. No, not yet. It's about time to buy one, isn't it? If you and Erica are okay with it, can we give it as a gift for his school entry? That would really help, Mom. Steve's voice perked up for a moment, but then there was a pause. What's wrong? Actually, Mom, I have something to discuss. Can we come live with you at our family home? Live together? I was speechless at the sudden proposal. Steve reluctantly explained the reason. I hadn't heard about it before, but Steve's family was currently facing financial uncertainties. As Max grows, expenses will increase, right? We need to start saving now, Erica and I discussed. So Erica is also hoping to live together? This was surprising to me. Erica, my daughter-in-law, had quit her job when she became pregnant with Max and had been a homemaker ever since. Although the woman my son chose was not a bad person, I always felt a barrier and still hadn't quite gotten a grasp on Erica. Normally, a daughter-in-law would dislike living with her in-laws. Erica is actually looking forward to it. In fact, she suggested we live together. I was truly surprised by Steve's words, But nothing could be more joyful than always being with my grandson. I agreed without hesitation. Is this my home from today? Yes. Let's live together. Yay! A month later, my son's family moved into our home. Max's presence instantly brightened our home. Erica, hang your clothes here, and the detergent stock is here. I showed Erica everything around the house. Thank you, Mother. Thank you too, for suggesting we live together. Though I still felt a barrier, I actively tried to communicate with Erica to build a good relationship. Initially, Erica was quite reserved. I did most of the cooking, but she took the initiative in other household chores and shopping. Isn't Erica a good daughter-in-law? No wonder Steve fell for her. Living together allowed me to finally feel positive about Erica. However, gradually, her true nature began to reveal itself. Your cooking is so bland and always full of vegetables. It's really plain, isn't it? Erica, who is picky about food, started to criticize my cooking. I'm sorry. When you reach our age, you tend to prefer lighter foods. But I make sure it's nutritionally balanced and healthy. Ever since my husband fell ill, I've been studying nutrition and am very careful about our meals. While the dishes might seem tasteless to younger people, I am proud that they are healthy. Erica didn't stop at just complaining about the food. Mother, I don't want creases in my clothes, so could you leave them hanging instead of folding them? Then you should do it yourself. Even Steve started to scold Erica as she became increasingly presumptuous. However, far from reflecting, Erica became even more arrogant. In these times, you should be grateful that I'm allowing you to live with your grandchild. Hearing Erica dismiss Steve's words, both my husband and I felt frustrated, but considering the ongoing cohabitation, we held our tongues. Erica, seeing our silence as consent, began to do whatever she wanted. At first, she did take Max to kindergarten and made his lunches, but even that became too much for her. Max, what about kindergarten? Mom said I could stay home today. Grandma, let's play. When it was too much hassle, she started letting him skip kindergarten. Despite being a stay-at-home mom, she even started neglecting to take care of her own child. I was truly appalled. But that was still nothing compared to what came next. You're going to kindergarten today, right? Oh. What about your lunch? This morning, Erica hadn't made a lunch. Feeling uneasy, I checked Max's kindergarten bag and found a snack pastry from a store inside. Sending a kindergartner to school with just a snack pastry for lunch. I couldn't keep silent this time. Erica, this is too much. As a stay-at-home mom, you should at least make a lunch for your child. However, Erica threw unbelievable words back at me. Neither you nor father-in-law are working much, are you? You have time. I am living with my in-laws for the sake of my son. Please think of Max first. What do you mean by that? From now on, please handle all the pickups and lunch preparations. The grandchild is a treasure, right? Erica smirked as she spoke. So this is her true nature. I was so angry that it made me sad. Unable to say anything, my husband, who had heard our conversation from the next room, came in. If Erica says that, then we will do as she says. After all, we are living together. My husband gave me a meaningful look. Yes, we will take care of Max ourselves. Pleased with our response, Erica returned to her room with a satisfied look. After a while, she dressed up and left the house alone. If that's what Erica intends, then we must respond appropriately. I nodded at my husband's words. That evening, Steve came back after Erica and Max had gone to bed. I hate to bother you while you're tired. We reported the day's events to Steve. I'm really sorry. I'll speak to her properly. Steve, already tired from work, was further stressed by the situation. We couldn't burden him more as he was working hard for his family, and we couldn't let Erica continue to do whatever she wanted while living with us. We have a good idea. Can you trust us with this? I said this, patting the worried-looking Steve on the shoulder and showing a smile. Following that, we prioritized Max's care as Erica had said. I took over making Max's lunches, and my husband took care of the kindergarten pickups. Now that Erica no longer had to take care of her child, she started waking up only after Max had left for kindergarten and often went out dressed up during the day. Sometimes, she would just laze around the house all day in her pajamas with her smartphone in hand. Honestly, it was bothersome, but my husband and I decided not to say anything to Erica. Taking advantage of our silence, her selfishness escalated even further. One day, Erica had not returned home by Max's bedtime. "Mom, where did you go? She's late, isn't she? I'll try contacting her." We were worried and called Erica. "Hello." Erica's carefree voice came through the phone. "Where are you right now? If you're going to be late, at least let us know." Then, an unexpected response came. "I forgot to tell you, but I'm at a hotel in Miami right now." "A hotel in Miami?" "Yes. I'll be back tomorrow evening, so please take care of Max." The call ended abruptly. A trip? We hadn't heard anything about it. My husband and I looked at each other and sighed. "Mom, where is she?" Max looked anxious. "She has some errands and can't come home today." "Max, let's sleep together today. How about we read the riddle book we borrowed from the library together?" "Yeah." Howard managed to distract Max well and took him to the bedroom. Just then, Steve came home. "Steve, did you know Erica was going on a trip?" Steve frowned. "A trip? What are you talking about? Where would the money for that come from?" Steve sighed deeply. "I better talk to her myself. Don't worry, I intend to make Erica take full responsibility. We are looking after Max properly." It seemed Steve sensed that we had a plan. "All right." Steve stepped back obediently. "But from now on, you should manage the household finances. You shouldn't give Erica any money other than her allowance." Until now, Steve had been giving all his salary to Erica, letting her manage their finances. So, he had no idea how much they were spending or how much they had saved. But that just let her do whatever she wanted. Following our advice, from the next month, Steve only gave Erica an allowance of $200 and made sure not to give her any more money than that. $200 isn't enough for anything. Erica protested vehemently. "But that's also my allowance." When Steve said that, Erica fell silent. "The woman next door has a brand name bag, but we have." Initially, Erica complained every time she saw Steve's face after he told her, "You're not doing housework or taking care of the kids, so you should work." But then she stopped saying anything. Erica started taking out her frustrations on me and my husband. That's why the food is bland and full of vegetables. Ah, here we go again. So annoying. Erica continued to complain about my cooking, but we were not defeated. Max says he loves it. "Yeah. I love Grandma's food." "Nice, Max." "Sorry, but we are prioritizing Max." We quietly fought back using the phrase Erica once used. "Think of the grandchild first. It's so noisy from the morning." One morning, Erica came out of her room looking furious. "I thought I'd make a swing for Max thanks to living with our grandson. I've found a new hobby." "Thank you, Erica." As soon as he said this, the sound of a hammer hitting wood echoed throughout the house. Erica frowned, but seeing Max's eyes sparkle next to Howard, she couldn't say anything more. Howard started doing DIY deliberately when Erica was at home. "It's noisy. I wasn't about to lose to Erica's grumbling. Howard is making a chair for Max right now. When you put your grandchild first, you just want to make things for him. Is there anything else you think we should make? Erica glared at me, who was smiling politely in response, and went back to her room. Contrary to Erica, who was accumulating daily frustrations, Max grew more and more attached to us each day. Steve, I can't stand living in this house. One evening, I overheard Erica exploding with complaints to Steve. Max seems very happy. Since we moved here, he hasn't even caught a cold. You're getting all the housework and childcare done, right? You better change your attitude soon, or you're going to have a hard time. Steve warned Erica. From then on, Erica's attitude improved somewhat when Steve was around. However, Steve often went on business trips. During those times, Erica would return home late as usual, doing as she pleased. Steve's words had no effect on her. It's been 8 months since they started living with us. Max had finally started elementary school. With the start of school lunches and group walks to school in the morning, there was no more need for packed lunches or rides, leaving my husband and me with nothing much to do. Max, what did you do today? My husband, a former teacher, willingly taught Max and started going to the library with him. Grandma, my friend said he wanted to come over, so I brought him. Sometimes after school, Max would bring friends home. Oh, welcome. Wash your hands, and maybe we'll bake some cookies. When this happened, just like when Steve was young and brought friends over, I would bake sweets with them or serve homemade treats if I knew about it in advance. Max's grandparents are so kind and nice. Right? Grandma and Grandpa are always on my side. Max said proudly, making his friends envious. Those words filled both my husband and me with joy. During dinner one day, when Erica usually ate quickly and returned to her room, she spoke to Max. Max, shall Mom help you with your homework? No thanks. Grandpa helps me with my studies. Max responded immediately. Seeing Erica's stunned face, we struggled to contain our laughter. Actually, that afternoon, Max had brought a friend home and they had this conversation. What's your favorite food, Max? Fried chicken. Can your mom make fried chicken? No, Grandma makes it. Actually, Grandma makes all our meals. Is that so? Erica must have heard this conversation from her room and finally realized she had no place in this scenario. How about we go out together on your next day off? No, I have plans to play with my friends. We're going to make pasta with Grandma, right? Max looked at me and smiled, so I smiled back and nodded. Seeing our interaction, Erica's expression turned visibly displeased. Aren't you overstepping by ignoring me, his mother? Erica glared at me. I was dumbfounded by her audacity but remained cheerful for Max's sake. It's exactly what you said, Erica. To think of the grandchild first. To us, Max is a treasure. That's not what I mean. Erica slammed the table, stood up quickly, and stormed into her room, slamming the door loudly. Seeing this, Max looked uneasy. It's okay. If Max wants to play with his mom, he can, and if he wants to be with Grandma and Grandpa, we're delighted. We are on Max's side. I patted his head, and he showed a relieved smile. From then on, while Max was at school, Erica persistently demanded, "Give me back my son." Give back? We are merely being grandparents. He's not even close to me, his mother. That sounds like a you problem. You must be saying bad things about me. Erica blamed us for Max not being close to her, ignoring her own actions since moving in. Steve must feel that this situation is odd too. Erica somehow believed Steve would support her. Since she wouldn't listen to us, we decided to discuss it when Steve returned from his business trip in 2 days. Steve, tell your father and mother to back off. As soon as Steve returned, Erica cried to him. We had already explained the situation to Steve, who sighed deeply. You brought this on yourself. Steve coldly rejected Erica. In a shocking turn of events, Erica then turned to Max for sympathy. Max, you like Mom more than Grandma and Grandpa, right? Max then came between my husband and me and grabbed our hands tightly. Grandma and Grandpa are always with me, listen to me, and teach me. I love my grandparents. Hearing this, Erica's face contorted. Are you betraying your mother? Her shout echoed in the room, causing Max to grimace. Seeing her lash out at Max was the last straw for us. Howard, could you take Max upstairs? Howard gently embraced the frightened Max and took him upstairs as I had asked. With the living room quiet, I slammed a thick envelope on the table. What is this? Thompson Detective Agency? Hearing detective agency, Erica flinched. I silently spread the contents of the envelope on the table. What is this? The photos clearly showed Erica holding hands with a man, entering a room together, along with a report that indicated an affair. We couldn't understand why we had to live together given Steve's average income. Suspicious of Erica, who neglected even her child's care and spent time frivolously, we hired a detective agency. The findings were beyond our wildest expectations, revealing Erica's affair. Steve glared at Erica as she trembled and looked down. You've betrayed our family. I want a divorce now. No, wait. Steve brushed off Erica's pleading hands. What's different? To you, we're nothing. Just go to that man you're cheating with. I had never seen Steve so upset. It pained me to see our son this way. I'm sorry. I went too far. I won't do it again, please forgive me. Trying desperately to be forgiven, Erica knelt. There's no way I can forgive you. Then I accept the divorce, but I won't give up Max. At this point, what was she thinking? I was astounded. You won't get custody. As I said this, Erica glared at me sharply. Max is my child. I bore him. I won't hand him over to someone like you. Erica was openly hostile toward me. For the past year, we've mostly been the ones taking care of Max. You've neglected your child and even had an affair. With all this evidence, there's no way you can get custody. I will get the compensation for the affair through the lawyer, too. If you object, we can take this to court. Anyway, pack your things now and get out of here. Thus, Erica was forcibly expelled from our home. After Erica left, Steve sat down wearily. I'm sorry for hiring the detective without telling you. While putting away the evidence of the affair into an envelope, I apologized to Steve. In fact, after learning of the affair, Howard and I had seriously debated whether to tell Steve the truth. We had hoped Erica might reform. However, there was no sign of that from her, and her attempt to unfairly hurt her own child was something we could not forgive. Mom, Dad, sorry for all the trouble. Can we still stay here? Steve apologized, looking remorseful. Of course. Let's raise Max to be happy together. At that moment, Howard and Max came down from upstairs. Dad, what's wrong? Max immediately noticed Steve's red eyes. Max, Mom is going to live somewhere else now. Max clung tightly to Howard next to him. Poor thing. He must have remembered being yelled at just by hearing the word. Mom. Max will always live here together with Grandpa, Grandma, and Dad. Saying this, Howard hugged Max tightly, and Max's expression softened a bit. Afterward, Steve and Erica proceeded with the divorce through their lawyers, dispassionately. The fact of Erica's affair also became known to Erica's parents. I am truly sorry for what my daughter has done. Erica's parents apologized, having flown in just to see us. Since the day we drove her out, we didn't know where Erica was or what she was doing. Do you think Erica is reflecting on what happened? When I asked Erica's mother, she gave a shocking response. We also don't know where our daughter is. We've disowned her. Disowned. I sensed a serious resolve from her parents. Just then, Max ran over. Grandpa and Grandma. You came to visit? Max. You've grown so much. Look, we brought your favorite snacks. They smiled warmly, clearly happy to reunite with Max. Max also seemed genuinely happy to see his grandparents, who he didn't see often. It's quite a trip to our place, but please come to see Max again. At my words, the two looked surprised. Is that really okay? Of course. Let's all watch over Max together. Thank you so much. To Erica's parents, Max was their only grandchild. Even though they were far away, their feelings were the same as ours. They always cared deeply for Max. Thus, even after Steve and Erica divorced, we kept in regular contact with Erica's parents and updated them on how things were going. Grandpa, I went catching dragonflies with Grandpa the other day. That's great. Next time, let's go bug hunting with Grandpa. Since Erica left, a peaceful life had returned to us. Recently, I learned that Erica had contacted Steve several times after the divorce. Erica asked me to get back together. Erica was quickly abandoned by her affair partner and ended up alone. However, she had never really worked and had always lived however she wanted, so she was not keen to find a job and soon ran out of her savings. So I hear that she pressed Steve for a reconciliation. When Steve refused, she then asked for financial support. People really don't change that easily, do they? I felt no emotion towards her anymore. Do you still get messages from her? I was worried. No. Every time she contacted me, I just sent her the affair evidence photos without writing anything. Then she gave up. Hearing that, I felt relieved. Thanks, Mom. Good night. Perhaps out of embarrassment, Steve quickly went to his room after saying that. It was a brief word of thanks, but I could sense many emotions in it. Thank you for the lively days. I murmured softly. A year later, Max, now in second grade, was deeply involved in soccer. After school, he would sweat it out at the soccer club, and when he came home, he would watch international soccer matches with Howard, who enjoyed watching soccer. On days when Steve was off work, the father and son would play soccer games together. Grandpa, want to try the game? That's okay. I can't handle such complicated things. It's not hard. Come on, let's play together. Saying that, Max and Steve sat down with Howard between them. Looking at the three men sitting on the sofa, I felt a touch of warmth. Surrounded by a calm and happy atmosphere. 3 generations, I want us to continue cherishing these simple everyday moments. Hey, lunch is ready. Hurry up before it gets cold. At my call, the 3 hungry men looked back. You 3 all make the same face. We all looked at each other and laughed.
There is no seat for poor people like you here, Susan said to me with a smirking laugh. Perhaps she says such things on purpose because she knows I'm a single mother. I felt irritated by her rude comment. Observing Nicole, she was looking at me and Susan with a sad face. Nicole. I didn't know what to say to Nicole. Then Nicole muttered softly. Let's go home. Yeah, I no longer wanted to be with these people. The wedding is off, Susan said with a triumphant smile. I'm glad we're not tied to poor people like them, George said to us with a look as if he were looking at something filthy. I glared at them and declared, just so you know, you'll regret this. I'm Rachel, turning 47 this year. My family consists of my daughter Nicole and my parents. I divorced my husband when Nicole was 5, and we haven't been in touch since then. My husband, who had an affair, chose his mistress over me and left our home. At the time of the divorce, I was desperate and felt no one to rely on. However, though initially shocked, time has gradually helped me cope. Now I am happy to have Nicole all to myself, and I even feel pity for her father, who missed out on watching her grow up. Frankly, life was tough when I first became a single mother. I had left my parents' home almost as if I were running away to marry my husband. My parents had always been against our marriage. Perhaps they had seen through my husband's true nature and predicted such an outcome. Since I had cut ties when I left home, I couldn't just go back to my parents after the divorce. Thus, I had no choice but to strive as a single mother raising Nicole. I had been a housewife until then, so I started applying for jobs I thought I could handle, even though I had never worked in a company before. However, finding a job was tough, and I often didn't even make it past the document screening stage. Amidst my growing desperation, I finally landed a job as a supermarket cashier, albeit as a part-timer, not a full-time employee. During the day, I left Nicole at daycare and went to work, but that alone wasn't enough, so I also did piecework at home, sticking labels on products. Each piece paid only a few cents, but I kept at it late into the night. Though every month was a struggle, we have managed to get by so far. However, after 2 years of living like this, it all came to an end one day when Nicole came home crying. "What happened, Nicole?" When I asked Nicole who was crying, she replied in a voice as if whispering, "My friend said they won't play with someone who wears the same clothes every day." Now, that's terrible. Hearing that Nicole had been told such things by her school friends was a shock to me. True, I often dressed Nicole in the same clothes, though I washed them to keep them clean. I simply couldn't afford new clothes. It was all I could do to prepare meals for us every day, let alone buy unnecessary items like clothes and toys. As I was thinking of comforting words, Nicole burst into loud sobs. "Why are we so poor? I'll be all alone at school like this." "I'm sorry, Nicole." I apologized to Nicole. It was all my fault for making her suffer like this due to the divorce. It was time to end this life. I resolved to return to my parents' home. I took Nicole and headed to our familiar old home over the weekend. I had left under such bad terms. I wasn't sure if my parents would accept us, but I didn't want Nicole to be sad any longer. As I nervously rang the doorbell, my mother appeared, looking flustered.
"Rachel, what have you been doing all this time? And who is this child?"
With a worried look, my mother asked, and behind her was my father. I had expected him to be furious and drive me away, but contrary to my expectations, he had a calm expression.
"Welcome back,"
my father said, tears welling up as he spoke to me. My mother also, moved to tears, began to cry. Seeing my parents like this, my eyes also teared up. "I'm home. I'm sorry for being so selfish all this time. I don't know if you can forgive me for coming back suddenly, but I want to live here with my daughter, Nicole." With tears streaming down my face, I apologized to my parents for everything that had happened and explained the whole situation. After that, I started living with Nicole at my parents' home. I quit my part-time job at the supermarket and joined my father's company, tackling unfamiliar tasks daily. There were many challenges, but with my parents' support, I grew into a competent employee. 18 years after returning home, Nicole, now a grown adult and working professional, gave me some surprising news. "I'm getting married. Can I introduce you to him soon?" So Nicole had found someone to marry. It was bittersweet to see her become independent, but more than anything, I was thrilled that she was happy. Her fiancé, Brian, was 3 years her senior. He is a very good person, and it's clear he always cares for Nicole. He holds no prejudices against me being a single mother. A few days after Nicole introduced me to Brian, an event occurred. "Actually, Brian mentioned wanting to have dinner as a meet and greet for both families this Sunday. Is that okay?" It turns out Brian's father works until Saturday, so Sunday is the only day he can make time. I'm off work on Sundays too, so it fits perfectly. "I'm fine with it. Let's meet his parents." As I responded, Nicole smiled relievedly. "Really? Thank you. I'll let Brian know then." At that moment, I was only wondering what Brian's parents would be like. However, I would soon regret taking things so lightly. The day of the meet and greet dinner arrived. "Nice to meet you. I'm Brian's mother, Susan. The man next to me is my husband, George. He's the president of a small company. Sorry for choosing such a cheap restaurant on short notice." Susan said this nonchalantly with a smile as we sat down. However, this restaurant is known as one of the upscale places in town. So I responded, thinking Susan was being modest. Such a lovely place. We hardly ever get to come here. I'm delighted, thank you. But Susan burst out laughing insultingly and said, You can't afford to come to a place like this? What kind of life do you lead? As I was puzzled, George too smirked unpleasantly.
Come on, Susan, don't be too harsh. After all, they are just ordinary people, unlike us.
Do Susan and George enjoy seeing the displeasure of others? If so, that's hardly a commendable trait, and Nicole seemed uncomfortable too.
Mom, Dad, that's enough.
What? It's just the truth. Brian scolded them, but Susan was unbothered. She even leaned back and inquired, So, is your husband working today? It must be tough having to work even on Sundays in a low-income family. It seems Susan and George are unaware that we are a single-parent family. Glancing at Nicole, she looked awkward. Brian didn't seem to care, just ignoring the comments. Nicole probably found it hard to bring up. I decided to honestly tell them about our family situation. I have no husband. I have raised Nicole on my own. My statement seemed unbelievable to Susan and George. What do you mean? You're a single mother? That means you're definitely poor. Brian, why didn't you say anything? Susan confronted Brian, but it seemed he didn't see our being a single-parent family as an issue.
It doesn't really matter, does it? Nicole is wonderful, and her mother seems like a decent person.
But when Brian responded, George clearly looked displeased and stood up noisily on purpose.
I won't accept you marrying someone who's from a poor family, Brian. Come on, Susan, we're leaving.
Yeah, what a waste of time. Susan and George said their piece and quickly left. Brian and Nicole apologized many times, but the bad taste remained. I made sure to exchange contact information with Brian in case we needed to talk. Despite all this, I wondered if Nicole and Brian could really get married without issues, but it seems Brian's resolve to marry Nicole was strong. Brian pleaded with his family and got permission for us to marry. What? How so? It turns out Brian had to persuade them repeatedly until they finally nodded. Still, Susan and George continued to staunchly oppose it. Ultimately, Brian even threatened to sever ties with them if they didn't allow him to marry Nicole. However, Brian is an only son. George, wanting Brian to inherit the company, naturally didn't want to lose his heir. Thus, they reluctantly approved of the marriage with Nicole. After hearing the whole story, I asked Nicole something that was bothering me. Doesn't that mean his parents aren't truly supportive? Are you sure it's okay to marry him without regrets? Marriage involves connecting families. I had married against my parents' wishes and ended up failing. I was worried Nicole might repeat my mistakes. As a daughter-in-law, Nicole would inevitably have to deal with Susan and George. But Nicole was resolute. I want to marry Brian, and I'll work hard to earn his parents' approval someday. Nicole? It seems I was overly worried. Nicole had her own firm beliefs, and I was moved by that. Then it's going to be fine. I'll be here to support you, so hang in there. Worrying about Susan and George any further was pointless. I decided to support Nicole and Brian's marriage in my own way. Just then, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Susan. What kind of nerve do you have as a mother? Our Brian has become totally rebellious because of you and your daughter. As soon as I spoke, Susan screamed at the top of her lungs. First of all, how do you even have my number? It was strange and unsettling. I hadn't given Susan my phone number. Then, as if it were nothing, Susan said, Oh, I just looked at Brian's phone. He usually doesn't lock it. Hearing Susan boast in a sticky voice made my head spin. It's unthinkable to tamper with someone's phone and invade their privacy, even if it's her son. Ignoring my dismay, Susan blurted out disdainfully, Can't you just tell Nicole to break up with Brian? There are girls more suitable for our family status than you poor people. Her incredibly rude comment made me laugh out of exasperation, and I couldn't help but retort. Just because I'm a single mother, don't assume I'm poor. We don't live a life that you can look down upon. But Susan pressed on. So you're saying you've never struggled with money as a single parent? I had struggled financially until I could rely on my parents, so I couldn't say I hadn't. Sensing my hesitation, Susan laughed loudly. See, you've struggled after all. It's pathetic when poor people try to pretend. Now tell Nicole to break up with Brian. Susan said her piece and hung up the phone. What is wrong with that woman? What should I do? I was just bewildered by Susan's one-sided attitude. Since Susan had been insisting on opposing Nicole and Brian's marriage, I was seriously wondering whether it was right to send Nicole off to marry into such a family. While Susan and George vehemently opposed me and Nicole, they seemed to want to appear favorable to Brian, claiming, "We're not opposed to the marriage." Eventually, Brian decided to go through with the marriage, citing Susan's words as his reason, and told me that the wedding would be a small family affair. They decided to use the restaurant that also accommodated weddings as the venue. Nicole's relatives were only me and my parents, but she was happy nonetheless. "I'm so happy that Grandpa and Grandma can celebrate with us too," Nicole told me with a bright smile, having informed my parents about Susan's behavior and gotten their consent to attend. However, on the wedding day, Susan behaved childishly. There are no seats. As my parents and I entered the venue, the groom's family side was already full, and there was no place for us to sit. My father frowned and asked,
"Rachel, what's going on here?"
There was one seat next to Susan, likely reserved for George. A high-end men's bag was placed there, indicating George had just stepped out. As we stood there confused, Nicole, still not dressed for the wedding, hurried over. "Mom! Grandpa! Grandma! Thank you for coming to the wedding today." Nicole was ecstatic on her big day, but she noticed something was off and asked, "What's wrong? Why is everyone standing?" "It seems there's been some mix-up, and we don't have seats." Realizing that what I said was true as she saw the confusion on her grandparents' faces, Nicole responded, "I left the seating arrangements to Brian. Let me check with him." Just as Nicole was about to go back to the dressing room, Susan's mocking laughter was heard. "There are no seats for poor people." "What do you mean by this?" "I've told you many times I oppose this marriage, so I borrowed the seating chart from Brian and edited out your names." Brian likely never imagined his mother, Susan, would stoop to such pettiness. The extent of her malice was astounding. "To our relatives, it's just a dinner party today, so no one is thinking of celebrating with you people. Too bad." Susan smirked, sticking out her tongue in mockery. Looking around, indeed, some of Susan's relatives were dressed inappropriately for a wedding, confirming her statement. Driven by the belief that Nicole and Brian were mismatched due to our supposed poverty, Susan had resorted to childish antics. Furious at Susan's excessive rudeness, I looked at Nicole, who was looking back at me with a sad expression. "Nicole." I didn't know what to say to Nicole. Her joyous occasion had been trampled on by Susan and her antics. Then Nicole murmured softly, "Shall we go home?" "Yes." My parents, seemingly disgusted as well, silently nodded. I no longer wanted to be around Susan and her family. "Good. The wedding is off then." Knowing that we were leaving, Susan seemed genuinely delighted. She clapped her hands in encouragement, chirping cheerily, "Hurry on now, off with you intruders." As this was happening, George finally returned to his seat. Susan, with a full grin, spoke to him. "The wedding is called off. They're leaving, so it's just a family meal now." George, unaware of my parents' presence, replied to Susan,
"Oh, that's great news. I'm truly glad that Brian isn't marrying into poverty."
Relieved, George showed his true colors. He truly opposed Brian and Nicole's marriage. However, ruining the occasion like this wasn't right. I glared at Susan and declared, "You will regret this matter, just you watch." But Susan only laughed, unaffected. Ignoring my astonishment, Susan continued unabated. "Why would I regret anything? My husband is a company president, you know? You poor people can't compete with us." George, standing beside her, looked confident.
"There's no one more important than me, a president. You can't even come close to my level."
Susan and George seemed convinced they were at the top. It was about time to take them down a peg. I smiled wryly and said, "George, being a president doesn't mean you're the greatest of all." This seemed to infuriate George, who quickly retorted,
"What? There's no one more important than me, a president. You, from the bottom rungs, have no right to say that."
George glared at me, but I wasn't intimidated because I knew I had the strongest support right beside me. The next moment, my father calmly stepped forward.
"We are always grateful for your services. It seems you are quite upset, but has my daughter done something to offend you?"
As George grimaced bitterly and stared at my father, his face gradually paled.
"You are—"
Susan, confused by George's sudden change of demeanor, couldn't hide her irritation and asked sharply, "What's the matter, honey?" Do you know this man? George was left speechless, unable to answer Susan's question. Seizing the moment, I revealed to Susan. My father is the chairman of E Automotive. Hearing E Automotive, Susan's face turned deathly pale. E Automotive? Wait, isn't that one of our main clients? Susan became completely flustered. My father observed Susan and George's reaction, then deliberately began to speak with a smile.
We are indeed grateful to your subcontracting firm. Well, your company is just one among many we deal with. As my father implied the presence of numerous other companies they deal with, George's complexion worsened, likely realizing that a contract termination was imminent. My father then calmly spoke to George. I might have installed others as presidents, but Rachel here is a potential future president. Are you familiar with the phrase, a frog in the well knows nothing of the ocean? Gah!
George groaned painfully at my father's sarcastic remark. My father continued, addressing George directly.
Frankly, it won't be a problem for us to stop doing business with your company. After witnessing your behavior towards my daughter and granddaughter, I can't trust you or your wife's character, let alone your business. No, that can't be. If we lose E Automotive, our company's finished.
After being sharply rebuked by my father, George began to beg on his knees, turning towards me. Susan, although shocked to see her husband begging on his knees, frantically tried to stop him. Stop it right now. We have all our relatives here. Despite Susan's attempts to get him to stand up, George remained in his position, sweating profusely. The attention of all the relatives soon turned towards us.
Please, I beg you, keep doing business with us.
Desperate, George clung to my father, pleading. However, my father showed no signs of relenting. Frustrated, George turned to me.
Can't you say something too? You're the future president, right? If we lose the business...
It's questionable to address someone you need help from in such a manner. Clearly, he's only thinking of himself. Watching George's desperation, Susan, sensing the gravity of the situation, lashed out at me. It's your fault for not revealing that you're the future president of E Automotive. If we'd known, we wouldn't have opposed Brian's marriage. I sighed deeply at Susan and George's self-centeredness. They were trying to blame everything on me. They seemed to have forgotten that they had just ruined Brian and Nicole's wedding. As I pondered how to respond, Brian, the other main character of the ceremony, appeared.
Dad? Mom? Please, stop this.
Brian spoke warily, seemingly disgusted with his parents. However, Susan and George, as if a savior had appeared, rushed to Brian. Brian, say something. If things stay like this, our company will go under.
That's right. We'll allow your marriage to Nicole. You fix this.
The couple looked up at Brian with pleading eyes, but it seemed Brian's patience had run out.
After ruining my wedding, now you suddenly change your tune? Changing your minds after finding out Nicole's mom is the next president of E Automotive. That's unacceptable. I'm cutting ties with you as parents.
Brian, not you too. Susan was clearly shocked to be rejected by her son. George looked stunned. I calmly addressed the bewildered Susan and George. Today was supposed to be a special day for Brian and Nicole. You ruined it, and I will never forgive you for that. And frankly, I do not wish to do business with people who belittle others for such trivial reasons. My father nodded in agreement.
Normally, it's not good to mix personal affairs with business, but you will be held accountable for hurting our important personnel. We will send the contract termination documents immediately. My mother also looked sternly at Susan and George. They had made an irreversible mistake, and we were determined to make them regret their actions. I turned to my family and Nicole. Let's go home. We need to discuss what to do next. Yes, let's. Leaving Susan and George frozen in the restaurant, we left. Both Susan and George seemed exhausted, but it was no concern of mine. Hell surely awaited them. When our business dealings ceased, George's company went bankrupt. I heard it had been barely surviving thanks to its dealing with E Automotive. George pleaded repeatedly to resume the business, but neither my father nor I had any intention of changing our minds. After the bankruptcy, George apparently disappeared, leaving Susan behind. It turns out George had personal debts that only grew larger after the bankruptcy. Abandoned by George, Susan also found herself in a dire situation. She called me repeatedly, too persistently, so I answered just once, but it left a bitter taste in my mouth. It's your fault our family fell apart. Brian has even cut ties with me.
If you feel even a little sorry, lend me some money. $10,000 would be enough. For Susan, a virtual stranger, to ask me for a large sum of money showed how desperate she was. Brian has said about her,
Mom was officially an officer at the company, but it was in name only. She's never done any actual work, and I doubt she'll start working now that she's alone.
Susan probably won't try to earn her own income now or ever. But since Brian has cut ties with her, she is certainly none of my concern. And it's wrong to push her responsibilities onto others. I blocked Susan's number. I also advised Nicole to block Susan, just to be safe. Left to her own devices, Susan will probably self-destruct. 6 months have passed since then. We're now about to celebrate Nicole and Brian's wedding. Brian has completely cut off contact with Susan since then. Susan wept and clung to Brian, but it was a situation of her own making. Finally, we are able to redo the wedding. Only my parents and I attended. My father looked happily at Nicole, who wore a pure white dress and was made up more maturely than usual. It was truly moving.
It's really wonderful that Nicole is my granddaughter. Rachel, thank you for letting me be part of Nicole's wedding.
Dad. There was a time when I had left home and was estranged from my parents, but thanks to Nicole, we were able to mend our relationship. Without her, I might still be holding a grudge and not reconcile with them. For that, I am truly grateful to Nicole. Nicole stood beside Brian, smiling happily. Seeing her like that, I felt as if my parenting was completely accomplished, and a sense of fulfillment emerged. Nicole, congratulations on your wedding. She smiled and waved back. Soon, I will take over my father's company and start learning more about management. Brian is also set to join our family business. Our company is a family business, and Brian may eventually succeed me. Brian might have a future role in leading the company, especially since Nicole may also be busy with childcare.
Me, as the head of E-Automotive.
Don't worry, Brian. I'm sure you can do it. As Nicole encouraged a modest Brian, I realized there was still so much ahead in my life. Becoming president will increase my responsibilities towards the employees. I must ensure that E-Automotive does not end on my watch. That's why I'm determined to keep moving forward without any regrets.
Mom is going to live with us, too. Facing me, who had just purchased the top floor of a 50-story luxury apartment building. My husband said this with a grin, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. If you don't like it, get out. Together with Chris, my mother-in-law laughed derisively at me. This pair had always been like this. They had always treated me terribly. And they acted as if it were perfectly normal, showing no signs of remorse. I looked down to block their gazes, to hide my sneering mouth and the ugly distortion of my smile from them. My husband, who had neglected me and our children and had never cared for our home. And my mother-in-law, who had egged him on. I was determined not to be manipulated by them anymore. With that resolve, I forced a vague smile onto my face and looked them in the eyes. That is, I cannot. That's what I muttered in my heart as I looked down again. Facing me, who said nothing back, my husband and mother-in-law hurled abuse. Let them keep underestimating me. In the background, I had been warming up a plan for a long time. To confront my deluded husband with the truth. And on the day of the move, a flood of calls came from my mother-in-law. Oh, caught on? By now, Chris and my mother-in-law must be panicking. And upon discovering the harsh reality, they will scream. My name is Gina Ford, a 47-year-old working housewife. I currently live with my son Tom and my daughter Sarah. My husband, Chris, has been on a business assignment for years. And we haven't even been in contact for many years. Our relationship can hardly be called familial, it's that distorted. However, it wasn't always like this between Chris and me. We met at a company drinking party when I was 23, and he married. Chris, 3 years my senior, was a lively and engaging person. At my first drinking party, I was nervously stiff in a corner when he cheerfully approached and brought me into the group. This sparked my admiration for him. He took care of me, and we soon started dating. Chris was always bright and fun, and I was increasingly drawn to him. However, Chris was a bit of a smooth talker and often nodded along without really listening to me. This slightly clueless aspect of him was overflowing with humanity. And at that time, it was attractive to me. As my feelings for him grew, I seriously wanted to marry Chris. He must have noticed my feelings because one day he earnestly proposed to me. Overwhelmed with emotion, I nodded through tears and dreamed of a happy married life with him. However, when I went to greet him for the marriage, there was a slight hitch. His father was a sensible man, but his mother seemed unable to let go of her son. "Gina, you are still only 23, right? Can she really support Chris properly at such a young age? You can't even manage household or work properly, can you? I doubt you can handle child rearing either." Being bluntly criticized like this made me shrink back. Then, his father, with a calm voice, reprimanded his wife. "What are you saying? You were the same age as Gina when you married me. And you gave birth to Chris when you were 25, didn't you?" His father's words silenced my mother-in-law, albeit grudgingly. Seizing the moment, Chris cheerfully said to them both, "It's okay, Mom. Gina might be young, but she's serious and hardworking. So she'll surely make a good wife. Right, Gina? You'll get along with Mom, won't you?" I nodded honestly to Chris's words. "Well, if Chris says so." With a sigh, my mother-in-law seemed somewhat resigned. With Chris's words and his father's mediation, I felt reassured and decided to marry him. At that time, I was truly young. When I reported the marriage to my own family, my parents were very happy. But my older sister frowned. My sister, 2 years older, was a good confidant who always listened to my stories. And she must have felt something off about my in-laws' situation. "Are you sure this is okay? Shouldn't you date him a bit longer?" I shook my head at my cautious sister's words. "It's okay. After all, Chris trusts me." I was eager to marry the person I loved and took my sister's concerns lightly. In retrospect, I regret not taking my sister's words more seriously. Knowing my determination, my sister sighed lightly and looked me straight in the eye. "All right. If you say so, I'll support you with all my might." Then she took my hand and continued. "But if anything happens, make sure you consult me. I'm always on your side." Thus, surrounded by blessings, Chris and I got married. However, even after our marriage, my mother-in-law's snide remarks and nagging didn't stop. And despite being newlyweds, Chris took me to his parents' house every weekend. "I'm an only child, and I want you to get along with Mom quickly." Unaware of my uneasy expression, Chris forcefully took me to his parents' house. Initially, in front of his father, his mother freely criticized me. But as his father continued to reprimand her, her attitude softened. Relieved for a moment, my mother-in-law then began to make snide remarks in secret. When her father and Chris were not listening, she blamed me. Unable to consult anyone, only the years passed by. However, the situation slightly improved later. 2 years later, my son Tom was born, and 2 years after that, my daughter Sarah was born. Using the busy days as a reason, I pleaded with Chris to reduce the frequency of visits to his parents' house. Even without this, Chris rarely helped with household chores or childcare. Even if my in-laws are close, given the current situation, it's impossible to visit every week. But Mom insists on seeing Tom. "You should show some filial piety occasionally too." I almost blurted out, "Then why don't you provide some family time?" But I swallowed my words in desperation. Despite my daily hustle with childcare and housework, all that came out of Chris's mouth was about his mother. He kept saying she was lonely or concerned about Tom. I couldn't help but wonder, which family does he really care about? After getting married, I realized that Chris was excessively attentive to his mother. Probably because she doted on him excessively. And such doting by his mother was another headache for me. Yes, another reason I didn't want to go to my in-laws was not just my mother-in-law's snide remarks. While she doted unconditionally on her grandson Tom, she showed no interest in her granddaughter Sarah, treating her dismissively. However, she didn't express this by being sarcastic as she was with me. Instead, she maintained complete indifference. She would buy toys and sweets for Tom, but nothing for Sarah. She only spoke to Tom. And she always repeated the same thing to Tom. Tom, you are the heir of the Ford family. So you must listen well to what Grandma says. Each time, the young Tom would tilt his head and look up at me with a puzzled face. Mother, I'm sorry, but that's a bit. As I hesitated to speak, my father-in-law next to me quickly picked up Tom and peered into his son's face, saying, Tom, you don't have to listen to Grandma. Instead, you should grow up to be a kind man. As my father-in-law spoke gently, Tom giggled happily. Thus, each time my mother-in-law tried to indoctrinate Tom, my father-in-law gently steered him away from her. Since Sarah was born, my father-in-law started speaking differently to Tom. Tom, do you like Sarah? Yes, I love Sarah. Then, promise Grandpa that you'll protect your sister. Yes, I can promise. Perhaps my father-in-law sensed something. He made a pinky promise with Tom. This happened when Tom was 6 and Sarah was 4 years old. The difference in my mother-in-law's attitude towards Tom and Sarah was blatantly obvious to anyone, even to the young children. That's why my son and daughter, who had become aware of things, were attached to the kind and gentle father-in-law, but not to the grandmother who showed interest only in her grandson. Tom always looked sad and asked me, why doesn't Grandma treat Sarah the same way she treats me? Seeing my son hug his sister tightly made my heart clench. That's when I started visiting my in-laws even less frequently. I was already disliked by my mother-in-law, so I didn't want to get close to her place. Moreover, my mother-in-law's excessive behavior towards my children. All of these reasons led me to refuse to visit my in-laws, using childcare and household chores as excuses. My primary concern was to protect my children's hearts. At first, Chris grumbled about us not accompanying him. But perhaps dealing with my steadfast refusal became too troublesome for him. Eventually, Chris started visiting his parents alone on weekends. Thus, naturally, a distance grew between us. And a year later, when our daughter turned 5, my father-in-law passed away due to illness. And Chris's life became even more centered around his mother-in-law. With the loss of my father-in-law as a buffer, Chris stopped asking me to visit my in-laws. Perhaps my mother-in-law said something to him. Chris started visiting his in-laws after work, and prioritized his mother over his family even on holidays. He had always put our family second, and this worsened. Eventually, Chris spent most of the week at his parents' house. While I struggled with the gap growing between us, I was also overwhelmed with daily childcare and household chores, and I let the issue slide. And a year after my father-in-law's death, Chris's returns home became as infrequent as a few times a month. As a result, he almost had no interaction or conversation with the children. Desperate, I pleaded with Chris to fulfill his responsibilities as a father. Hey, the kids have a sports day coming up. You alone are enough for that. Chris dismissed it outright. Besides, on that day, Mom has asked me to do something for her. Again, it was his mother's errand. I inadvertently confronted Chris with a stern tone. But the children's events are once in a lifetime. You're their father after all. No, Mom is getting old, so it's only natural to prioritize her. What about our family, our daughter, and our son's feelings? How many times must the children have asked when their father would return or come to see us? Each time, I soothed the children. Then, with tears welling up in their eyes and lips pursed, they looked so brave. How many times that sight pained my heart. Chris always said, "You and the kids lack consideration for Grandma," angrily blaming us and storming out to stay with his mother for weeks. This continued for years, and I finally began considering divorce. But with only my part-time job income, I was unsure about supporting 2 children. That's when I remembered what my sister had said. My sister, who had not looked favorably upon our marriage. Her concerns had become a reality. I decided to call and consult her. After hearing my story, my sister chuckled slightly. Just as I thought, it turned out the way I feared. Actually, at that time, my sister was also married and in a similar situation. Hearing my story, she felt very uneasy. "I should have talked to you more thoroughly and stopped you." Sighing with self-deprecation, my sister shared an idea with me. Additionally, she offered financial and childcare support. It turned out she had divorced a few years ago and was providing me with various useful insights based on her experience. Currently, she was living alone near our parents' home and working. Following her advice, I began to gradually prepare for a divorce. At the same time, my husband, who had hardly been coming home, told me over the phone that he had suddenly been transferred. "I don't know when I'll be able to return, and Mom is going with me," he said briefly and hung up. I was surprised, but this situation was actually a blessing in disguise for me. While he was away, I acted steadily towards my goals with the help of my sister. The idea my sister had shared was challenging, but it made each day fulfilling. Seeing this, my children stopped mentioning their father. Instead, they started to support me. Their encouragement gave me strength. 3 years later, I finally achieved my goal. By that time, the financial support from my husband had ceased. But I had successfully become a full-time employee in a certain industry and was supporting the family financially. Little by little, the preparations for divorce were coming together. During this time, the children grew up healthily. The years flew by with their entrance and graduation from elementary and middle school, and then high school and college entrance exams. Of course, I had contacted my husband multiple times, but he never returned from work to attend any of the children's school events. 14 years had passed since his transfer. By then, my son was working, and my daughter had reached adulthood. Suddenly, Chris returned home with his mother. It was such an unexpected return that my children and I were shocked and looked at each other. Ignoring our confusion, Chris acted as if he still ruled the house, just like when we had lived together. Our irritation grew with his arrogant attitude. Both my children and I were indifferent to Chris, who had never shown any familial duty, responsibility, or, most importantly, affection. Hey, what's with that attitude towards the head of the family, you guys? Who do you think allowed you to live comfortably? My son responded with a sardonic expression. Who? It was all thanks to Mom. What? There's no way a mere part-time housewife could support a family financially. Stop talking nonsense. Watching him rant, I suddenly questioned. Hey, why did you come back now? Chris answered arrogantly. Mom recently hurt her leg and became bedridden. She needs care. Nodding, my mother-in-law also agreed. Chris then told us about a more dreadful plan. We'll all live here together, and you and Sarah will take care of Mom." Facing his words as if it were a natural family obligation, we looked at each other. "You've never acted like a father before, and now you're playing the family card?" "Exactly, we have our own lives. Besides, we're moving out to a new place." "What? What are you talking about? You just need to listen to me." Faced with his selfish words, my children and I decided to mercilessly execute the plan we had prepared. "Actually, you know the luxury apartment near the station?" "What? The 50-story one?" Thinking he was caught, I continued without confirming or correcting. "We decided to move there. I tried contacting you, but you never responded." "What? Then, Mom and I will live with you in that house." As he said something absurd, his mother nodded vigorously next to him. "You must be joking." "Absolutely not. My children and I desperately refused to live together. But Chris and his mother wouldn't listen and were fully intent on moving into the tower mansion. Mom is going to live with us, too." Facing me, who had just purchased the top floor of a 50-story luxury apartment building, Chris said this with a grin, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "If you don't like it, get out." Together with Chris, my mother-in-law laughed derisively at me. This pair had always been like this. They had always treated me terribly. And they acted as if it were perfectly normal, showing no signs of remorse. I looked down to block their gazes, to hide my sneering mouth and the ugly distortion of my smile from them. My husband, who had neglected me and our children and had never cared for our home. And my mother-in-law, who had egged him on. I was determined not to be manipulated by them anymore. With that resolve, I forced a vague smile onto my face and looked them in the eyes. "That is, I cannot." That's what I muttered in my heart as I looked down again. Facing me, who said nothing back, my husband and mother-in-law hurled abuse. Let them keep underestimating me. In the background, I had been warming up a plan for a long time. To confront my deluded husband with the truth. And upon discovering the harsh reality, they will scream. On the day Chris and his mother moved in, I had actually moved to a different single-family home with my children. Yes, moving to the luxury apartment was just a ruse. By now, Chris and my mother-in-law must be panicking. As evidence, my smartphone was flooded with calls from them. I answered the call from my mother-in-law in a deliberately relaxed tone. "What's the meaning of this?
Yeah.
Why aren't you guys here?" "Oh, caught on?" Then I confront my husband and mother-in-law with the harsh reality. The kids and I have already moved safely. Hearing this, my husband and mother-in-law scream. "What do you mean? Explain this." They complain to me upon learning this. However, I rebuff them, pointing out that they were the ones who arbitrarily decided to live together. Moreover, I use the long period of separation as grounds to push for a divorce from my husband. I had decided on a divorce and consulted my sister, who introduced me to a lawyer specialized in divorce, and I had been consulting with him. I was fully prepared. My husband resisted. But when I informed him that the divorce could be granted based on our long separation, he finally agreed to the divorce. At the end, he spitefully said that he didn't care if a part-time housewife who bought a house without savings struggled. In my heart, I muttered that it was okay, because I was already working as a full-time employee. And then I hung up the phone. Yes, my husband, who had neglected our family for 14 years, didn't know that I had gone to nursing school and become a nurse. When I discussed divorce with my sister, she suggested that I could attend nursing school using a nursing scholarship. which doesn't require repayment if I work at the sponsoring hospital afterward. In fact, my sister had also become a nurse using this scholarship and was working. At that time, she told me that our hospital was hiring and suggested I apply for an interview. Gratefully, I took her advice, and that has brought me to where I am today. Also, my husband didn't know that our son had landed a job at a top-tier company. Our ability to move into a single-family home was thanks to my stable job and my son's high income, which significantly eased our financial situation. And the luxury apartment I bought for my husband and mother-in-law to live in wasn't a new building. It was a 60-year-old building past its warranty period, rumored to collapse immediately if there was an earthquake. That's why I was able to buy it for a song. My husband must be shocked by now, thinking he was going to live in a new luxury apartment near the station. But that was just a misunderstanding he had from listening to me. 3 months after divorcing my husband, he and my mother-in-law were brought into the hospital where I work. Afterward, they gave up living in the apartment due to suspicions of it being a defective building, and seemed to be living in a rundown apartment. My mother-in-law, who was frail and had poor health, worsened her condition by catching a cold due to living in a drafty apartment without proper preparation. My husband also caught the cold from her and was running a high fever. I was dumbfounded by their lack of planning but continued my work indifferently. Eventually, a woman who appeared to be my ex-husband's new girlfriend visited them. Apparently, he had started dating her after our divorce. The girlfriend, who had come to visit, seemed to have been fed lies by my husband, as she verbally attacked me while I was taking his temperature. "I've heard from Chris. You treated your mother-in-law terribly, didn't you? And you lied all along." While I continued my work, I firmly told her the truth. "I don't know what you heard from my ex-husband, but this man prioritized his mother over everything else for 14 years. And never contributed to our living expenses during that time." "What?" The woman was visibly shocked. My husband protested, claiming it couldn't be true. I pulled out a bankbook I always carried from a file and thrust it at my husband. He checked its contents and uttered in dismay, "It's true, but why?" Stunned, my husband seemed to realize something and went to his mother's private room. He then asked her loudly, "Mom, I always left the money management to you, right? What's this all about?" While surprised by her son's fierce demeanor, my mother-in-law turned red and trembled. I had once heard about my mother-in-law's lavish spending from my father-in-law when he was alive. That's why my father-in-law had always managed the money in their household. Likely, my mother-in-law had embezzled the money meant for us. Misunderstanding that she could spend freely, she must have squandered it. As I explained this calmly to the woman, she looked horrified and broke up with my ex-husband on the spot, then left the hospital room with loud footsteps. Watching her leave, my enraged husband cursed at his mother. "Everything is ruined because of you. What are you going to do about this? It's not my fault. What's wrong with using my child's money?" My mother-in-law threw a tantrum and cried out. Amid the chaos, I quietly stepped away from them. Later, during his hospital stay, my ex-husband persistently pleaded with me to start over. "There's no chance I will start over with you. Besides, I'm about to be transferred soon." Yes, I had been assigned to transfer to a hospital in the countryside. This place had too many bad memories. My children and I felt this way, so after discussing it among ourselves, we bought a house in the neighboring state to start a new life. 5 years later, my children received a call from their father that their grandmother had passed away. They hesitated to attend the funeral, but I encouraged them to say their last goodbyes. Later, they told me that their father had aged significantly when they saw him after a long time. And the funeral seemed shabby and older than his actual age, my daughter remarked quietly. Hey, you guys, please. Aren't we family? Help me out. Although begged by their father, my son and daughter fulfilled their familial duties and returned home. And relatives, knowing the circumstances of our divorce, had distanced themselves from my ex-husband. In the end, he was left all alone after losing his mother. I think about it. Parents inevitably go before their children. Isn't it a parent's duty to guide their children to be able to walk on their own? I vow to myself not to forget this, and to maintain a healthy distance with my children's families to avoid the same mistakes as my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. Since then, I have been thriving as a nurse, maintaining a good relationship with my married children.
Emily, I have two things to say to you. I sold our house for $500,000 and bought a new one. Also, I filed for divorce, so today's goodbye.
After 3 months hospital stay, I came home to find strangers living in my house. I called my husband, Michael, right away, and he laughed while telling me this unbelievable news later on. It was utterly chaotic, and although it would be shocking for anyone, I responded with surprising calmness. Can you even move out? You're about to be arrested by the police. Michael's laughter stopped abruptly over the phone, but it returned within 3 seconds.
What are you talking about? Why should I be arrested? I heard you were hospitalized from an accident. Did you hit your head too hard? Maybe you should go back to the hospital and get your head checked.
The one who needs his head checked is Michael. I knew he had a knack for doing dumb things. His arrest by the police was not a bluff, but a certainty. My husband had no idea what was coming when I was getting ready to strike back. A few days later, I called him out to discuss matters further. Parking my car a short distance from the meeting place, I took a deep breath before speaking. Michael, you can't just sell the house on your own, can you? You didn't consult me, did you?
It's in my name, so there's no problem, right? The house is mine, so there's no need to consult you.
No, it's in my name too, remember? It's a joint property, and you can't sell it without my consent.
Yeah, I guess it's in your name too. But I can still sell the house without your consent. In fact, I've already sold it and got $500,000.
Michael reclined confidently with a triumphant smile.
How did I sell the house, you ask?
His face seemed to demand, so I reluctantly asked him to explain. Then, explain how you sold the house.
I guess I have to tell you. Listen closely because I'll only say it once. I sold it privately, just between individuals. Like you said, going through a real estate agent would involve complicated procedures. But if it's a private sale, there are no problems. See? You didn't know that, did you?
Michael had been looking down on me for about a year now, so this was nothing new. With a vulgar laugh, Michael continued his tale.
I work at my father's company and I'm regarded as a genius salesman. Selling 1 or 2 houses is a piece of cake for someone like me. I even sold it for twice the price through a private sale. Life is easy, isn't it?
I see. But is that okay? Selling a house privately like that can be legally void, so the sales agreement might as well not exist.
What? That's not true. The person who bought the house agreed to it too.
As I also own the house, I didn't consent to it, so it's impossible. Plus, Michael, you sold it for twice the price without an appraisal. That's a dangerous game you're playing. The sales agreement will be nullified and you'll have to refund the full amount. There might also be a claim for damages from the person who bought the house. Michael's vulgar laughter stopped abruptly. His face paled slightly and his hands trembled a bit. This reaction indicated that Michael was unaware of the implications. Had he known, he wouldn't have attempted a private sales in the first place.
Why do you know so much? You're not lying, right?
There's no benefit in lying here.
That's true. So agree to it, Emily. If you consent to the house sale, everything will be resolved. We're a married couple, so helping each other out is important, right?
We're divorced, remember? Did you forget that you filed for divorce on your own?
Oh, right.
Being so self-centered leads to these kinds of situations. If Michael, who has already purchased a new home, has to pay back the full amount and possibly face claims for damages, he will incur a significant debt. Michael, pale-faced and flustered, began to stammer, but soon seemed to have an idea and spoke up.
Well, it won't matter if it's not discovered, right? The buyer was an elderly person in their 60s and probably didn't notice. Yeah, I should just run away with what's left of the money. Maybe even run away overseas.
That sounds like a great plan. Indeed, if it doesn't get discovered, maybe you can get away with it. That's if it remains undiscovered. Just then, a man appeared behind me. Seeing that man, Michael's eyes bulged out in shock, and he was rendered speechless. His reaction was so comically exaggerated that I couldn't help but burst out laughing. What's with that face? It's rude to our guest who has come all this way. Let me introduce him to you. This is Mr. Kevin Miller.
I don't need an introduction, I know him. This is the old man I sold the house to. Why, Emily? How do you know him?
Well, listen carefully because I'll only say it once. During my hospital stay, Mr. Miller visited me every day. He shared many stories with me, including about you.
He visited you? Why would some random old man visit you, Emily? Don't tell me. You were having an affair with this old man?
At that moment, Mr. Miller and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. Unable to contain ourselves due to Michael's absurd accusation, Mr. Miller regained his composure and explained everything to Michael.
Michael, for me, Emily is a lifesaver. She was hospitalized because she was saving me. That's why I was visiting her. That's all. And I was surprised to find out that you are Emily's husband. I thought she was single since you never visited her at the hospital.
Mr. Miller's tone was gentle but contained a firm anger. As Mr. Miller stated, Michael had never visited me during my hospitalization. From before my hospitalization, Michael had been cold and unresponsive, likely planning to discard me already.
Oh, come on, Mr. Miller. Please don't be angry. I was just too busy with work to visit her at the hospital. Besides, it was just a fracture. It's not about the severity of the injury. It's inconceivable to neglect your wife while she's hospitalized, and your attitude says it all about how you usually ignore Emily. It's truly humiliating to have been deceived by you. That house, by the way, wasn't worth $500,000 but $250,000. I will sue you for a full refund.
Mr. Miller's words and gaze sharpened, and Michael became increasingly flustered, desperately searching for a way out. Seeing this, I decided to play my next move. And by the way, Michael, tell me about the divorce papers. How did you submit them to the office?
Well, how? I just wrote the names, signed it, and submitted it.
I thought so. So you wrote my name and signed it without my permission, right? That's forgery of a private document and use of forged private document. Both are clear crimes. I've already filed a police report.
What? A crime? A police report? Are you saying the police arrest you mentioned was...
The day I returned from the hospital, Michael had told me,
I've filed for divorce.
And I immediately questioned this. Our relationship had died down, but we never discussed about divorce before. Naturally, I had no memory of signing the divorce papers, so the only conclusion was that Michael has signed on my behalf. By the way, regarding the house sale, I can also file a fraud complaint. The police are always on top of their games, so you might get arrested soon, Michael. You've really messed up.
Hey, Emily... Let's forget about the divorce. I'll have it annulled. You don't want to divorce me, right? Let's just pretend this never happened.
Faced with my husband's ludicrous proposal, I was utterly dismayed. There was no way to undo what had been done. Michael had intended to discard me, and after such actions, there was no continuing our marriage. Moreover, Michael was still hiding important details. At this point, I took a further step to get to the heart of the matter. No need to annul it, Michael. I'm prepared too, with my own divorce papers. I was planning to file them even if you hadn't. Could you sign them now? And don't forget the alimony.
What? Why do you have divorce papers ready? And what do you mean by alimony? There's no way I'm paying that.
Oh, did you think it wasn't discovered? Her name is Sarah White, right? Your affair partner. She's quite beautiful. Michael, you really did something, huh? Upon hearing the specific name, Michael froze as if time had stopped. Yes, Michael had an affair partner named Sarah. The house sale, the purchase of a new home, the divorce, all were for his affair partner. Michael had been secretly having an affair even before I was hospitalized for 3 months. That was why he had become cold towards me. Michael, having underestimated and disrespected me, probably assumed he wouldn't get caught. I glared at him with utter contempt. He seemed momentarily intimidated, but he quickly retorted.
Don't make false accusations. You don't have any proof, do you? I don't know any woman named Sarah. Demanding alimony based on your wild fantasies. That's the real fraud.
Are you sure you want to say that? You might regret it later. It would be better for you to just apologize and pay the alimony.
What? Are you threatening me?
I'm just giving you advice. You definitely cheated, and I'm going to prove it now. Saying this, I turned and pointed to a particular location. My car was parked a short distance from the meeting place. Suddenly, the car doors swung open forcefully. Out stepped a petite woman around 4 feet 9 inches tall, with the beauty of an actress. Hello, Michael. Have you forgotten about me? After such a passionate night, that seems rather harsh, doesn't it?
Hey, Emily. You brought Sarah in your car? No wonder you parked it a bit away.
You didn't notice at all, Michael. By the way, I had Sarah's and my phones on call, with a speaker on, so she could hear everything. Everything was completely transparent. After noticing Michael's infidelity and investigating, I reached out to Sarah. Instead of confronting Michael first, I contacted Sarah. When I revealed that I was Michael's wife, she was genuinely shocked. This was because Michael had lied to her about being single. Thinking they were in a serious relationship, Sarah was furious when she realized she had been deceived. She apologized profusely to me and agreed to help discipline Michael, leading us to this moment.
I'll be a witness. Now you have to admit it, right? Would you like me to show the evidence? My phone is full of lovely memories with you, from fancy restaurant dinners to pictures of you sleeping in bed.
Michael, there's no escape now. Just admit your guilt and apologize to everyone. After that, accept your due consequences. I'm demanding a divorce and alimony. For Mr. Miller, you'll need to refund the entire amount from the house sale. After finishing my speech, Michael dropped to his knees vigorously. After a few seconds of silence, Michael cautiously spoke up.
Could we perhaps discuss making payments in installments? I really don't have any money right now. Please, I promise I'll pay.
Michael pleaded desperately, his face shrinking in size. Both Mr. Miller and Sarah frowned upon seeing this. The two were unaware that Michael had bought a new home. They thought he still had $500,000 on hand. Mr. Miller, Michael bought a new home. Besides, he spent everything at fancy restaurants to impress Sarah. He doesn't have any means to repay.
What? Is that true? Then I have no choice but to file a damage report right away. Well, that's unfortunate. Take care, Michael. No. Wait a minute. I said I'd pay in installments. I do have a way to repay. I'm an elite salesman at Harine Corporation, remember? I gave you my business card when we dealt with the house sale. I'm the top performer there, so please just be patient.
Michael desperately tried to prevent a police report. Harine Corporation, where my father-in-law worked, was well known as a major company. If Michael was indeed recognized there, he might be able to make the payments. However, I shook my head and advised Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, you mustn't believe him. Michael absolutely cannot pay. Let's go ahead without hesitation and file that damage report.
Emily, how can you be so sure? I can definitely pay it back. I've been working diligently and have achievements to show for it.
What? You're about to be fired and soon to be unemployed. I don't think you can really claim you'll definitely be able to pay.
Fired? Me? That's impossible. Don't make assumptions.
Do you think I made that decision? Michael, you really know nothing. Just wait. I'll make it clear to you soon. Here I pointed again to my car parked at a distance. Just like before, the car door swung open briskly. Out stepped an elderly couple. Michael's face rapidly paled and his body began to tremble. The elderly couple were his parents. As they slowly approached, their expressions were fierce, creating a tense atmosphere all around.
Dad, Mom, why are you here? Emily told us everything. We were waiting in her car too, listening to the conversation over the speaker. Michael, it seems you've done something terrible. You sold the house without consulting Emily and even filed for divorce on your own? And the house sale was done privately, wasn't it? What were you thinking, causing so much trouble for so many people? Seriously, not just Sarah, but my parents were in on this too?
This matter had already been reported to my in-laws. It was essential to bring them here today to deal maximum damage to Michael.
I'm thoroughly disappointed in you. You told us everything was fine between you two, but that was a lie, wasn't it? You're no longer welcome in our home, and you're fired from the company. I'm fired? Wait, Dad. Sure, I cheated, but that has nothing to do with the company. Think it over. And about the new home, it was also for you and Mom. I bought it thinking about your retirement. I want you to stay healthy and well.
Michael appeared to be trying to win over his parents. He seemed to be playing the good husband with a fabricated reason for the purchase, but it didn't resonate with his parents at all. Instead, their anger only seemed to grow as they glared at him with a fearsome expression.
Michael, no matter what you say, you're fired. It's decided. Take this time to reflect and look for another job. Understood? This is a joke. How much do you think I've contributed to the company? We could overcome tough times because I was there, and now you're just going to throw me away? How can you do this?
Michael's anger flared as he appealed to my father-in-law. It's true that Michael had worked hard. His results at Harine Corporation, a major company, were indeed due to his efforts. According to what his parents had told me, Michael had also been exceptionally diligent in his studies during his student days, all for the sake of working at my father-in-law's company, eventually planning to take it over. Naturally, his parents were well aware of Michael's intentions. Nevertheless, his father spoke firmly.
Yes, I appreciate everything you've done, Michael. I've been hard on you, but you've always followed without complaining. Right? Then you'll retract the firing, right? I intend to repay Mr. Miller. I'll work hard and change my ways. No, that won't do. I'll say it again. Your firing is final. Michael, please accept it. Why? I'm begging you. Emily, did you say something unnecessary? That must be it, right? Confess.
Now Michael directed his anger at me. He seemed desperate. Of course, I had said nothing extra. Separately from this incident, there were reasons why my father-in-law had to fire him. House sale, new home purchase, divorce, infidelity, and there was one more thing Michael had committed, a grave crime. Michael, you should confess. You have been stealing company funds and extorting a colleague.
What? Stolen company money? You mean embezzlement? And he was extorting a colleague? Is that true?
Yes, that's the case. There was a whistleblower. One of the subordinates who had been extorted found the courage to stand up, and then one fact after another came to light. That was why my father-in-law would not retract the firing. Michael had gone too far for any redemption. Now that everything was out in the open, Michael had no excuses left. He looked around at everyone's faces, but I shook my head slightly. Seeing this, he seemed to resign himself and collapsed to his knees. Apologize, Michael. That's all you can do now. After that, you need to pay for your sins and start over.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to be arrested. Please, Emily, do something. We're married, right? Dad, Mom, help me. Don't conveniently bring up being married. As Emily said, all you can do is apologize and atone for your sins. Relying on your wife only when you're in trouble after you file for divorce without her knowledge. It's truly pathetic.
Both Mr. Miller and Sarah looked at Michael with pity. It was inevitable. Michael had only ever thought about himself, even at the very end. Seeing Michael completely silenced, my heart felt a bit lighter. However, the next moment, I was struck by a huge shock.
Emily, don't get cocky. Don't preach to me.
Suddenly standing up and shouting, he lunged at me. I couldn't react in time and was caught by him. He grabbed my collar so tightly I couldn't breathe or speak. He was strangling me and I almost lost consciousness. But immediately, Michael was sent flying through the air and I was released. Coughing from this suffocation, I looked at the person who had thrown Michael. It was Sarah.
Michael, I had no idea you were so rotten. A man who lays hands on a woman is scum. I will never forgive that.
Everyone present was understandably stunned. Sarah, who is only 4 feet 9 inches tall, had effortlessly thrown Michael. I later found out that Sarah had won a national judo championship in high school. She had started judo because a girlfriend of hers was being harassed by a boy in their class. Since then, she had been throwing men who harassed women. Softness controls hardness. It's as if the saying was made for her.
Wow, that was incredible. What a throw. Emily, are you alright?
Yes, I'm fine. I was quite shocked, though. Should we call the police? This is assault, isn't it?
Yes, he grabbed a defenseless woman. There's no excuse for him. Okay, I'll call 911. Wait, please, I was wrong. I'll do anything. Even grovel. Just don't call the police. Oh, sorry, I've already dialed 911. If you have something to say, you can tell it to the police. This can't be happening. How could I have been so foolish? Someone help me.
Michael sobbed and lamented as he regretted his actions. Everyone sighed deeply in unison. Thus, a day that seemed long yet short drew to a close. Later, I officially divorced Michael. He was criminally charged by Mr. Miller for the house sale, and he faced massive debts due to alimony and damages. He had to let go of the newly bought house, but he was still drowning in debt. Michael was utterly broken, and no one was there to help him. It was entirely his own doing. It was only natural. He would likely live a lonely life from now on. But the story didn't end there. Michael approached me, wanting to reconcile.
Hey, Emily, I've realized something lately. I really need you. You must be lonely too, right? You've always been a housewife, and life must be hard. So let's get back together.
He really made me laugh. Hasn't he learned anything? That was the first thought that came to mind, but I was too dismayed to even say it out loud. I can't deny I'm lonely being alone, but there's a 0% chance I would get back together with Michael. That's an absolute no. Moreover, Michael doesn't understand anything about me. I decided to update him on my situation. I have no problems with my life, you know. I've gone back to work.
What? You went back to work? You were a housewife.
Before I dated you, Michael, I worked at a real estate agency. You know Nez Real Estate, right?
Nez Real Estate? That's a major company. Oh, so that's why you knew so much about real estate. It turns out you're more of an elite than me.
Michael seemed lost for words over the phone, but then he seemed to have an idea.
So you're making good money now, right? Please help me. If Nez Real Estate pays well, I'll do anything you say if you help me.
Really, you understand nothing. It's because you can only think of yourself that you're in this situation. Michael, you need to change yourself first. And please don't involve me in your life anymore. Goodbye. Just before hanging up, Michael was still shouting something, but I blocked his contact without hesitation. Now I'm enjoying living alone. The house Michael has sold without my knowledge was returned and sold as part of the divorce settlement. My work is going well and my days are fulfilling. Recently, I started judo as a new challenge. Of course, Sarah is the instructor. Since then, we've become good friends, almost like comrades in arms in private life too. I decided to take the plunge and try judo when I heard she was teaching it. It can be used for self-defense, and more importantly, it can strengthen the mind. This incident was largely due to Michael's rampage, but my own weakness was also to blame. When Michael's infidelity came to light, I should have faced him seriously. If I had acted sooner, perhaps a different future could have been possible. It's too late to talk about what ifs, but I wanted to change myself too. When I casually checked my phone, there was a message from Mr. Miller.
You are my lifesaver. I am glad to have met you. You have saved me.
Reading that made me want to start anew and move on from the hurt Michael caused me. I'm aiming to appreciate every encounter and be truthful with myself and everyone else. That's all that's on my mind right now.